March 27th, 2024. Well, I want to discuss the issue of the Moscow attack and kind of what we've learned about it since then. It's always good on things like this to let things settle a little bit and see where you're kind of heading because all sides are pointing fingers at each other at this point. Um, Before I get into that, I want to briefly discuss the issue that I raised in the last video about Representative Gallagher. I have been calling his office and kind of pushing this idea to urge him to reconsider. I think that's the best thing to do, and I encourage everybody to do so. They won't bite. Just be polite. Say you're disappointed in that decision. Hope he reconsiders. And also, if he were to actually, go through with it, please do it by say the 5th of April rather than waiting to after it's too late to put up an alternative candidate to represent his district. So, at any rate, but I'll put information below on that. But back to what the main topic is that I've advertised: the Ukraine. I mean, the right attack on Moscow and what Ukraine might or might not have to do with it. Of course, the attack itself is basically understood to be due to this organization known as ISIS-K, which is a group allegedly, basically from Afghanistan. However, the people that did this particular attack were from Tajikistan, which is across the border, another Islamic country in the area. And of course, there probably are groups there that are similar, maybe they've moved up there. Maybe the Taliban ran some of them out because they're so radical, they consider the Taliban to be too moderate, apparently. So anyhow, and apparently they do have some kind of a Telegram channel where they have a propaganda wing or something. What's going on here? That's a good question. It looks like that I immediately had some ideas just looking at this going, why did this attack occur after the election? I mean, it seems to me, well, and of course, remember the American announcement that was before the election about the Americans should stay away from major events, public events, because there was a risk of an attack and so forth. And there's also disputes about to what degree the Russians were notified of our intelligence. And we'll leave that. We know it was publicly stated. We don't know if it's officially transmitted and with any detail behind it or not. So that is unknown. I've heard claims from Scott Ritter that it wasn't, but I don't know. He has his own biases there, so you have to be a little cautious. So that's kind of the way this is looking right now. What does seem to be the case is that the Russians were able to capture a bunch of people involved, and the 4 actual shooters were captured as well. And apparently we're making their way to escape, and apparently we're on their way. Well, there's a little controversy here, but we'll clear that up too, I think. I saw an article on that. They were apparently making their way to't when they were apprehended and were apparently interrogated. Well, not very nice ways, but they apparently did talk, and so it appears that they claim that they were actually paid to do this attack. These are not your normal jihadis that die for the cause, and all that stuff. And it also seems that they're associated with a group that's in Turkey, which apparently where they may have had some training or something. Now that's per Scott Ritter. What isn't per him is that there was an arrest of a group in Turkey by Turkish authorities associated with this ISIS group. So at any rate, so this is a kind of the situation, that we're looking at here, that we have a group from Tajikistan based on a terrorist group known to come out of Afghanistan that apparently had some training in Turkey and did a terrorist attack in Moscow. So this is really kind of what's going on here, okay? By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. I appreciate it all the time there. And of course, those who haven't subscribed, please do. We're looking for more subscribers as always. So, anyway, so yeah, that's, my personal theory is that this attack was supposed to happen before the election to be a disruptive factor on the election. And what happened was obviously something prevented it from going through on schedule, and I guess they were committed to their mission, and so they carried it out when they were able to get reorganized and to do it, which of course was last Friday. So after the election. So, and what's interesting is, and this is per Scott Ritter, it's very interesting that apparently on the date that we had warned, that is the U.S. government embassy had warned that there would be a risk of attack and people should stay away from public events, there was going to be a performance at that same theater. But this time, instead of a rock group, it was going to be a patriotic Russian singer, and which would presumably attract more like Putin supporters and people that might be more likely to support the war. Like I said, the last one, I tend to think that the rock group people might be less inclined to be, regime supporters, if you want to call them that. And so, so that would be the exact target that would make sense for the Ukrainians to want to hit, right? I mean, they wouldn't want to hit the youth. Like I was saying, the last one I was skeptical. They'd want to hit the youthful group that might be more opposed to the war. If nothing else, they don't want to have to participate, maybe. And especially the urbanized, cosmopolitan Muscovites as opposed to people out in the agricultural areas and so forth. So, which might be more inclined to join up for the pay and so forth. So this makes a perfect target for a Ukrainian op, of course. But of course, it was an Islamic group that did it. But the Islamists would probably be just as mad at the rock and rollers as they would be at the patriotic people. They're all the same as far as they're concerned. They're enemy, right? If they really are Islamists. So that's an interesting question right there, which kind of shades it. And the fact that they were on their way to Ukraine after the mission and got caught, it seems to be kind of interesting. Now, the countervailing viewpoint has just popped up that the head of Belarus has said that, well, they were trying to get into Belarus, but they couldn't get in somehow. Either they were stopped. I don't know, they were literally stopped at the border, or they simply saw that it was closed. I don't know. Maybe it was closed because, well, they were escaping, and Moscow put out the word, don't let anybody in right now, because they could be the bad guys. And so maybe what he's really saying is he did his duty as an ally of Putin, you see. But now we're twisting it and saying, well, it shows he's lying. But when they couldn't get into Belarus, and they proceeded on down to Ukraine, and there's claims, at least on the Russian side, that they have intercepts of their cell phone conversations where they were trying to arrange a passage into Ukraine. So, and then we have the fact that there was an interview with the head of the Ukrainian intelligence who seemed to be quite happy about all the assassinations and attacks that have been carried out inside of Russia, and seemed to be kind of taking credit for all of them. And even this one, they seem to be kind of smirk a little bit. So I'm thinking that what we may have here is, well, first of all, we have a group that apparently is basing and training in Turkey, which was arrested by the Turkish government once the Russians informed them of its location. So it looks like it's not Erdogan's group. He's not favorable to them. They're just basing there in order to have access to targets in the West, I guess. So what are we starting to think here? That maybe Ukrainian intelligence has made contact with ISIS-K and managed to, I don't know, give them a little money and support in order to carry out operations in Russia that they want to carry out. I'm kind of more inclined to that, and the thing misfired because they hit the wrong target, because they were basically a week late, if you will. So, or maybe not a week late, but several days late, and when they, at least that's a theory I have. I mean, while the U.S. is trying to say that, I mean, the Ukrainians initially claimed it was a false flag by Putin, which seems a little unlikely in my case that they would do something like that, which may look him somewhat weak if he can't stop these things. So I don't think he'd want to do that right now. And remember, we blew up the big pipeline, and then blamed Russia for blowing up their own pipeline, which is obviously bogus. But but yet that mythology has still been maintained by official circles, uh, in spite of its absurdity. So what I think is now where I tend to disagree a bit with the rhetoric here. I'm not sure even saying this, but what I think may be the case is that maybe because of the situation that's developing in the conflict, desperation is starting to set in at Kyiv, and they are lashing out. And while this may be an operation that they did on their own without our approval, so to speak, and we found out about it and said, "Gee, we hope we don't get any Americans killed in this thing." So they put out the warning, and it may well be that the security could have been amped up a little bit at the time the original attack was supposed to happen, which deterred the attack, which then they recalibrated at a time and place that everybody let down their guard. Anyway, that's kind of my pitch on the subject. I think that that there is a Ukrainian involvement, and I think there is an ISIS-K involvement, and it may be kind of an unholy alliance here of sorts. And of course, the problem is this group might also attack other targets on their own, like in Europe or something. I don't know what, but since hopefully the Turkish crackdown put them out of business for now, at least in that area. Anybody thinks it's different, let me know what they think, and comments are always welcome. But I think that might be, what's going on there. So, so anyway, that's kind of my view on that. As far as the war itself, which I think is make a few comments on that. I noticed that the Russians are definitely on the offensive. They are making gains, and yet the Ukrainians are still pulling off attacks on. They're primarily going after the Russian Navy, and finally, I guess they fired the head of the Russian Navy. I'm kind of like, why did you wait so long? I mean, these guys are obviously kind of incompetent, that they haven't come up with some better ways to protect their ships after all these sea drone attacks. But now the ones from the missiles, that could be partly due to the fact that the A-50s have been run out of the air after the two were shot down, and they may be, kind of, be on the cautious side now on that. And of course, they were able to they finally used their so-called Zircon missile, which is a long-range hypersonic missile, and managed to strike what was alleged to be a Ukrainian intelligence building in Kyiv, and also hit a couple of Patriot missile defense batteries. So that's going on. On the ground war, I'd say, as I've said in previous things, the Russians have the initiative, but it's a slow-moving offensive. Some of the panic you're hearing in Europe seems to me to be a little unwarranted, in that it's unlikely that they're going to get to Kyiv anytime soon with a ground force. I think they're way away from that at this point. Now, there is talk, and because I guess we're in the kind of muddy season over in Ukraine right now, that you're basically restricted to mostly moving on roads and doing infantry attacks over the ground and stuff like that. A lot of drone activity, as always. But there is, and of course we did, right before the election, we did have another thing which I think still points in the direction I was in the previous segment there, where I was talking about the fact that those allegedly Russian anti-regime people that have been trained and were sent in there to fight around Belgorod and the area around north of Sunni and so forth, that area that we heard about before the election area, they were basically eventually defeated. It was kind of a futile effort, but it did do maybe some embarrassment. But it looks to me like that there is some talk that the Russians are planning on launching a major offensive using units that are not currently inside of Ukraine, that are going to come in from the northern direction, apparently, and to, what I would think would make sense anyhow would be to try to break in, behind the front line from the north, and disrupt the supply of the front line Ukrainian forces, and try to roll up that front line at least to some degree in the north, and then end up taking Kharkiv. That would seem to me to be a reasonable move, but we don't know. I mean, if they're capable of that. I mean, what the actual Russian capability is has always been disputed, because NATO always says, well, everything they have is already in Ukraine. They have nothing left. And then other people think, no, they really are building a significant army outside of it. So I'm not, but if that's possible, that may be what happens sometime around May, probably May. And because remember, the situation is that I think that aid is probably going to be forthcoming from the U.S. In fairly soon here, maybe by May. It'll take a while even after money is approved to do it, but you have a discharge petition that is making progress in the House, and you also have the Speaker is saying he wants to do a different proposal, and I think basically is to carve out the economic aid to Ukraine and turn it in the form of a loan, which of course will never be repaid, but it's sort of a face-saving way for all the people that don't want to give away the money, that kind of thing. And so that's that's kind of what that is. But he's under a lot of pressure from all directions now. And of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene is threatening to make a motion to vacate the chair, but she hasn't really made the motion yet, so we're not sure if it's really going to happen or not. Another crazy idea, in my opinion, at this point. But if it did happen, of course, we might be without a speaker for a while and would shut down all these appropriations. And of course, the government budget's pretty much gone through, so they could do it now, I guess. I think our hope of getting, like my last video, I went into this, what I call the Republican collapse. To me, they are totally incapable of putting together a rational strategy at this point. The best we can do at the moment is hold the House, hopefully, and keep the Democrats from enacting their strategy. So that's kind of what I think is going on. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and that's why I'm pushing that Gallagher thing too. I don't know whether it has any chance of success. I have no idea why he's really doing this. I mean, some people think there's an alliance of rhinos trying to bring down the Republicans, but I don't really regard him as a rhino. I mean, I've not seen that in any of his previous behavior. And he is somebody I've been following because of the UAP issue and his statements on that. He seemed to be pretty strong on the Chinese thing and the TikTok and all that. So, anyway, so that's kind of the way that is. But I think the other thing that's brewing, of course, is the French threat to send perhaps 2,000 troops into the area of Odessa to sort of be a red line that the Russians shouldn't cross or something like that. And that's kind of brewing, which could lead to some escalation. I'm not going to go any depth. I might address that in a future video, what I think about those whole issues. But so for the moment, I think that's it. I think that unfortunately, that one form or another, we're going to continue this war. And of course, my attitude is this, that since we know that Ukrainian officials are siphoning money off the aid, that's encouraging them to basically continue the war, even if it's not in Ukraine's interest, because they're getting rich off of it, and they probably won't stay in Ukraine when it all ends, right? So that's the negative thing that everybody's not over here talking about. We're always just presenting this as some kind of noble, patriotic freedom fighters against the evil Russians. But the truth is, neither side has their hands clean in this thing, needless to say. They all have their dark sides. And I think the corruption actually is fueling the war. And so that's kind of why I take that position on it. And I believe that rather than pursuing this thing to the nth degree, what we should do is open negotiations and see what kind of deal we can make before any unfortunate escalation finally occurs. Anyway, that's kind of my view on this whole situation. See if anybody has any comments, what they think. And of course, I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble. And of course, the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. Until next time.